Welcome everyone. This is our first Hip Hop Cafe event of the year at Hart House. And this one, as you know, is going to be focusing on the intersections of hip hop, basketball, and sport activism. I want to just acknowledge and give a special thank you to our two guests who will be introduced shortly, Kayla Gray and Donnovan Bennett. I'm a fan of both of your work. And thank you so much for agreeing to come on board and to help make this talk possible. My name is Zoe Dill. I am a manager in the Learning and Community Department at Hart House. My colleagues, Brad Cooley and Jessica Rain, who are both HH Brad and HH Jessica on your screen, have joined me here today. And this event is presented as part of Hart House hip hop education programs. So hip hop at Hart House is now in its second year. It is really just a program to explore hip hop culture, all of the different intersections that hip hop has with our daily lives. Not just artistically, but in many different realms, we'll be unpacking some of that today, of course. A while ago, Jessica and I were actually in a meeting with a prof from the US who is now doing a research project on hip hop and space. And she made a comment that just stuck with me. And she said that, hip hop is so everywhere that it's nowhere. And I think it's almost a testament to what hip hop is, but also maybe one of the challenges now. So this conversation is kind of a way to reconnect the strong and sort of look at the strong ties between hip hop and basketball and how in this moment of social and racial justice, how those two things are really coming together. So Brad had asked me to talk about why this event, and I'm just looking at a whole bunch of notes that I wrote, but I'm going to just summarize, first of all, why not this event? It's the perfect time to have this event. Sadly, it's the perfect time to have this event. But I consider myself a basketball junkie, and I think those people who know me would agree with that. I think it's perfectly normal to check NBA and follow players on Instagram and have at least one basketball reference per day. And I think most of my colleagues would say, like, yes, that's you. You always have some story. You always have something basketball related. So I was just saying to Ryan, who's going to be moderating, that I read his bio yesterday evening as I was preparing for this, and I saw that he does the same thing. So it is normal. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks, Jessica. I'm getting the clap sign from her. But it's a conversation I wanted to have last year, actually, when the world wasn't quite as crazy. Just because it's kind of a no-brainer, right? And as the quote that Brad included in the event notice said, from Quavo, there is no basketball without hip hop, and vice versa. But back in 2015, I had the pleasure and honor and privilege of working pretty closely with John Carlos, who's an amazing human being, former Olympian, social advocate. Some of you may know him from the iconic picture of him and Tommie Smith in the 1968 Olympics with their raised hands and the Black Power stance. And my mind, just when everything sort of started going down this summer and in the fall, in the spring, my mind just went directly to him. And I just thought about, how he must be feeling in this moment, looking 50, 60 years from that time, whatever, my math was probably off there, but a long time, and wondering about, how are we back in this exact same moment? I thought about Colin Kaepernick as well, and I found it quite powerful to see all of the coaches and all of the players taking a knee during the anthems, etc., during the playoffs. And then, of course, taking a knee, and the weight, quite literally, of taking a knee took on a whole different meaning in the wake of George Floyd's murder. So many things have happened, starting with many people, but for me, just kind of starting with Ahmaud Arbery, and then Amy Cooper, which was like a big trigger point, even though it didn't end up being, one of the the more violent encounters, and it didn't end up in somebody being dead. But when I watched Kayla, your Where Can We Be Black video, it just really, everything just, that's exactly what I was thinking as I was thinking about all these folks. So I do think it is a really good moment right now to talk about sports and sports activism and hip hop and its connection to basketball, and how those two, both basketball and hip hop artists, are galvanized around this issue recently. Obviously, it's been about voting, but it's obviously about many other things. So, long story short, that's kind of the impetus of this talk. We have several hip hop cafes. We had a few last year. Like I say, this is the first one. We'll have another one next term. That we hope will be equally engaging and equally as important. So I'll leave it there and give it back to Brad. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Zoe. I really appreciate you speaking. And it's been such an honor to work on this. I know how much you care and how much so many other people care about it. So it's been a huge honor just to be able to support and build this little program for everyone. Again, my name is Bradley Cooley. I'm a program assistant with Hart House. And again, like I have a privilege to work on the Hart House Hip Hop Education Program. And to all of you in the audience, to whoever helped support this and push the word out and get people here, thank you for being a part of it. Part of this, it means the world to us. So I'm joining you virtually from my home in Toronto, and I would also like to acknowledge the land on which my home and the University of Toronto operates. This includes the land, the waters, the skies, the wildlife, and the spirits. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and I'm grateful we have the opportunity to work, play, create, and connect on this land. But knowing the names of the First Nations that continue to live on this land and have cared for these lands for over 15,000 years should just be a starting point, particularly for those who identify as settlers, such as myself. Learning about the land, the languages, the treaties, and the worldviews of our First Nations should be a next step. And I encourage you to do so by visiting a website, and it's called nativeland.ca. I'm going to put that in chat shortly, and I encourage you to continue your exploration of the knowledge and the relationships we've had with our First Nations peoples. So with regards to my role here today, I'm going to be helping you, all y'all at home. I'm going to help you ask questions and try to connect with Kayla and Donnovan and Ryan. Typically when we do this, we're in a room. We're together, we see each other, we make eye contact, we connect, we laugh. And it's hard not to do that with these because the knowledge cipher, the circle, they're important aspects of the cafes. I always call them the unlecture, whereas this isn't about knowledge being transferred didactically to one person to the other. It's about a community and a connection that we all have together to share these stories and learn from each other. So saying that, what I'm going to try my best to do is work with our moderator, Ryan, who I'll be introducing very shortly, but him and I are going to be trying our best to communicate throughout the whole event to best facilitate you having your voice and connecting with people. We can do that primarily two different ways. If you feel comfortable talking on the video like I'm talking right now, please use the raise hands function. And then we'll keep a queue of who wants to say something, who wants to ask a question, and we'll find appropriate times throughout the conversation where we can jump in and allow you to speak. We also understand that some of you may not be comfortable on the camera or may have technical issues. Whatever reason you have, we support you just to write questions in chat too. Totally cool. I will also do my best to make sure I follow along and I can see your questions, and I will ask the panel those questions on your behalf. Whatever way you feel most comfortable with, we're there for you. And then I think that's about it. Again, we'll try to take breaths throughout the conversation to have those things. Again, this isn't meant to be a lecture. This is about conversation. Feel free to interject, to think, to probe. That's what this is all about. And then finally, I think really, I'm going to take me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen again here because we've got something real important for y'all. Basically, it's my job now to introduce today's starting lineup. So As we begin, ladies and gentlemen, we have Kayla Gray. Kayla is an award-winning journalist who is currently an anchor for SportsCenter on Canada's leading sports network, TSN. When she made her debut on SportsCenter in 2018, Gray became the first Black woman to ever host a flagship sports highlight show in Canada. Make some noise in chat for that right now, everyone. I want to see people blowing up chat because that's huge and we appreciate that. She's also contributed to TSN's basketball coverage, which was highlighted by serving as a reporter for the Toronto Raptors during their historic NBA championship run. She was also a reporter for the 2019 Toronto Raptors NBA championship parade, which was attended by an estimated 1.5 million people in the city of Toronto and watched by 5.7 million people across Canada. If you were at that parade and you got sweaty and nearly passed out, make some noise in chat. I would type there too if I could. Okay, next up, Mr. Donnovan Bennett. He is a feature host, producer, and radio host for Canada's Sportsnet network, a member of the Sportsnet team since 2013. Bennett's work often touches on the intersections between sport and race, politics, gender, and pop culture. Previously nominated for both a Gemini and Digital Publishing Award, Chips, Bennett has made a name for himself by telling stories on multiple platforms. In addition to his role as a writer, Bennett hosts videos for Sportsnet's social media platforms and also on radio as a co-host of Free Association, Sportnet's NBA podcast. And then finally, rounding out the trio, we have Ryan Lau. If you are a student or a friend of Ryan or a family member, blow it up for Ryan right now in chat, please. He is a fourth-year undergraduate student, the Faculty of Kinesiology and Physical Education at the University of Toronto. He intends to enter medical school upon graduation. Ryan's pursuits in medicine has complemented his passions of sport, pop culture, media, and social issues. Throughout his undergraduate education, he has grown an appreciation towards helping others and advocates for global awareness towards the intersectionality of culture, race, and sport. Ryan is a Chinese Canadian from Markham, Ontario, where he grew up playing multiple sports, but primarily basketball. As a DeMar DeRozan fan and an even bigger Toronto Raptors fan, he indulges in NBA content with a passion, just like our friend Zoe. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our crew. We're honored to kick this off. Ryan, I'm going to pass it on to you, please.
Thank you, Bradley. Thank you for that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Kayla and Donnovan. It's great to have you guys here. So as we all know, we're here to talk about hip hop, basketball, and social activism. So just to get right into it, we're going to use something that Bradley likes to use, the word of connective tissue, and how basketball and hip hop culture are this related piece together. And so like Zoe mentioned earlier, there's this quote from Quavo, a rapper and producer, and he says, basketball is hip hop and hip hop is basketball. It's no way hip hop would be around without basketball. And so with that, I want to ask Kayla and Donnovan yourselves, what does that mean to you guys? So, let's unpack this whole idea of where hip hop and basketball share this DNA.
Kayla, ladies first.
I love the Quavo line. I also think about Drake's line where he talks about players and it was like, they want to be us and we want to be them. Or maybe I said that wrong. Please don't take away my street cred. But I think when you look at the NBA in particular, the two go so hand in hand. And, it's culture. That's what it is. When you think about one of my favorite players ever growing up, Allen Iverson, I think he just embodied that, walking through the way that he played. That is kind of how this marriage has happened. And then also you can go back to activism. And we're talking about Bill Russell days and how conversations between players, but also artists in the music industry, those conversations and relationships were forming. So, for me, taking a step back and watching just how these two have formed so seamlessly together has been something that's pretty incredible to witness. But it just only makes sense. It is the culture. And so, it's one of those things where I would agree with Quavo. Like it's just that is what I experience. It's the game day experience. Not only when you roll up to a Raptors game are you getting the product on the court, but you're getting the product of the entertainment. And that's where there's a huge difference between when you go to a Raptors game or say a Leafs game. It's all wrapped in one.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree. Well, a couple of things. Shout out to Ryan for being a fellow Markham man. And Bradley, I don't know why you had to go out and say TSN is the sports leader and just put that on Front Street when you have a Sportsnet man
We
here.
all knew he was going to come out here and get petty, but go on.
I know we're trying to be friends today, but no, but seriously, yeah, Kayla said it. I mean, you talk about Iverson, like, let's be honest, there was a dress code put in effect because the league at the time what was thought to be a little too hip hop and a little too uncomfortable for some of the consumers that didn't seem to be very hip hop. And at the time, people thought it was racist. And I mean, it was somewhere in between racist and Iversonist, but it was targeted 100%. But there was a cultural shift that came with hip hop, with Jay-Z rapping "change clothes, go get a suit, get it tapered up." That as hip hop changed, the league stopped fighting it. It was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to be about my business. And so now there's space for both. You can see Shea Gilgeous-Alexander walk in a very nice fit, and no one is making a big deal about it. Or you can see LeBron walk in a beautiful three-piece, and no one's making a big deal about it. Why? Because they're both hip hop, and because there are consumers, both black, white, and indifferent, that love both. And so the league has taken its cues from hip hop and how it's marketed itself. If you take out your Shazam app while you're sitting in your seat, when we're allowed to sit in seats again, all of the tracks, all of the instrumentals that are being played are hip hop. I mean, there's hip hop people being tied to the teams. How much of the Raptors brand now, and for the young people who are on this call may not remember, but like, it wasn't always the flyest thing to wear Raptors gear. Like, you had to be a die hard. But the boy OVO gives the cosign. Ryan, I see you got the owl on the chest, and now We the North is moving units. But what moves the most units? That black and gold does, right? Because of the tie to hip hop. We've seen the Atlanta Hawks try to do the same thing, and other franchises have tried to do the same thing with less success. But the two are hand in hand at the business level. But even when you talk about the entryway, often like you're going into hip hop or basketball to get out of something, to get out of a dire situation where those are really the only avenues that you have, right? And so, Biggie rapped, you either have to sling crack rock or have a wicked jump shot. He was able to rap, so he didn't have to have those two other things. So sadly, those have been the avenues for upward mobility in our communities, and they go hand in hand. And so when 2 Chainz, puts out an album, rapper go to the league, like, that's really what it's about. And so for the NBA's benefit, they've been tied to hip hop, even at times when they didn't want to be. So I see them being intrinsically linked. So now the real challenge, and it shouldn't be as much of a challenge as it is for people like myself, for people like Kayla, is to tell stories where they're intertwined, but more importantly, convince our bosses that they're intertwined, because they 100% are.
Yeah, and to add to Donovan's point, like, I think what maybe the league might not have intended, but what the space does allow for, audiences that aren't not Black, is to see that Blackness is not just one thing. Like Donnovan said, you can have a swaggy fit, but you can come in a three-piece suit. So for a predominantly Black league, players are allowed to show up as is. There are not 1-2 players that are the same. And so I think that the league puts a huge emphasis on that, but also gives a great space for an audience to really recognize that.
For sure. It's even interesting to hear, because we see that there's rappers that love basketball, and then there's the basketball players that are rappers. We have people like Damian Lillard, we have Aaron Gordon, we have Lonzo Ball. All these basketball players are out here producing albums themselves. And then, like, in contrary, we have all those rappers like Quavo, we have Drake. We've even seen those videos of J. Cole beating up some other NBA players in the pickup games. So it's pretty interesting to see how closely knitted the culture of hip hop and basketball are together.
And your boy DeMar can rap too.
Exactly. So to one of the next questions so over the whole season with the Raptors and the bubble and everything, both you guys were able to speak to the players either directly or indirectly. We've seen them talk to each other, and you've seen other players discuss the topics that we've seen over the time of the bubble, and possibly away from the camera or even in the moments that weren't shared with viewers. We'd like to know, from your guys' perspectives as broadcasters, what are some things that maybe haven't been said or shared due to larger editorial choices? Just because obviously, with media, certain things get cut off. As broadcasters, you guys might be the ones be able to hear the certain things that are not shared to us.
Yeah,
so you
I
want
think
us to put their business on Front Street?
this is what I was about to confirm. Yeah, I mean, I'll say there are a lot of things that were shared to me outside of the conversations that were on air, but out of respect for the players and their families, I'm going to keep that to myself. But what I can say is during this time where we were having sort of this racial reckoning and real conversations, I never once thought of myself as a broadcaster. I first showed up as Kayla, who is a Black woman, a proud Black woman. And so it almost in a way changed the dynamic in space in which I was having the conversations with athletes, because I wasn't looking at, say, a Norman Powell as a basketball player. I was speaking to Norman Powell in these times as a Black man who was also going through it. And so it got a different layer of conversation, a different level of conversation. And, it was something that I kind of had to battle with, because there were questions, of course, that you want to put to air. I wanted an audience who not predominantly is seen in Canadian sport media to know that this conversation is important to at least me and hopefully to my network. But at the same time, I don't know if it's the motherly instinct or if it's just the protection of a Black woman, where I was not willing to let, say, certain players retell their stories of trauma, because I did not feel as though the audience nor the network was at a point yet where it meant something. And so at some point you have to say, no, we're not going to let people retell and relive their trauma if it's not getting through, and if it's only serving as a means of entertainment. And so did I compromise my journalistic integrity in that sense? I'll admit it, probably. But I think there were other ways that I learned in which I could still deliver the message that players wanted to deliver through the vessel of interview, without compromising their mental health.
Yeah, I mean, well, one, I don't know if there's too much that we don't know, because quite frankly, the players were pretty raw and pretty honest. Like, I mean, Doc Rivers is out here crying. The Raptors are telling you exactly how they feel. So they probably did not go into the level of specifics that they would with someone like Kayla. But we kind of know what time it was. Like, it was difficult. And, one thing, and in fairness, Kayla's on the beat. Like, she's covering the team and on the broadcast at a much closer level than I am. So, anything she says on this topic is much more relevant than anything I say. But one thing that was said to me on the flip side of how difficult it was, because it's the main thing that you hear, it was difficult to be there, and I think we understand that. One thing was said to me by a prominent Black basketball figure, I'll say, and Kayla, he has probably said this to you. And when I checked in to say, like, how are you doing? He said it was difficult, it was tough. But you know what? To be honest, we're built for this expletive. And Kayla, you may not know who I'm talking about. But like if you think about it, and I'm talking about Black people specifically right now, like, our history is dealing with trauma. Our fellow brother, T-Rex Tyrone, he's tweeted it, and many have said it after. I'm not sure how many have said it before, but like, our trauma is not a trend, but the trend of our history is that we've always had to deal with some sort of trauma. And when you think of the fact that, like, I always try and be present and cognizant of the fact that like anything that I'm dealing with right now, my life right now is the dream of a slave. Like it's the dream of a slave. And so as difficult as it is, you know, and as empathetic as I am, I really actually got some strength hearing from this person tied with the league that like, yeah, it was difficult. It was tough. People don't understand we have to deal with that and perform and do our job. But like, this isn't my blood. Like, this is what it is. I'm built for this. And I know that. And I walk in with confidence, knowing that it's going to be more difficult. But it's going to be less difficult than the people who've been able to do it before me and the shoulders with which that I stand on. So, you know, that kind of made me feel like, okay, yeah, like let's keep our eye on the prize, for sure. So that's probably something that maybe couldn't be said, because I think some people wouldn't understand. And I just think in our aggregator society, you can't properly explain that in a text or in a tweet. But when it was said to me, we were built for this expletive, like I got it 100%.
Thank you, Don. That was great to hear. It's a great sharing moment to understand what a lot of audience members wouldn't get to hear, you know, especially us being audience members. While you guys are in there, there's a lot of things that we don't get to see or hear or even feel. So hearing that directly from you definitely lets us, you know, have an idea of what it meant to be feeling in those moments. In terms of with the same question, do you guys ever feel like, you know, when you're talking with the players or even others, you know, part of managers or any members of the teams, I guess you would say, you guys ever felt like players maybe were holding back in what they were saying, or if certain things had to be held back because of they were not just an athlete but also a Black male or woman?
I didn't feel so at all, in particular with the Toronto Raptors. I think they were very clear in their messaging. And I think specific to the point where they were asked if they were willing to boycott. And they were the first to say, yeah, we could wrap this up anytime. And I think that is as open and honest as, you know, a bunch of players who understood the risk of heading to a bubble, to restart their season in this time. I don't know if you can find anyone more front facing and honest than that. And I think it goes to what Donnovan had mentioned, is these players were ready. They were ready to say what they needed to say. They wanted to stay on message. I mean, we're talking about a team who, outside of the work that they've been able to do on the court, individually, all of them are incredibly smart, which should not be a surprise, but they're incredibly involved with their community. And so I don't think there was ever a doubt in my mind that anyone was hopping into the bubble and not trying to listen to or stay in touch with what was happening in their respective communities. And I think that it was helpful that a lot of them were very open and honest and vulnerable, because the times called for it. You know, things were not right. And frankly, I think because of the stillness, the sports audience was looking for some kind of escape. And players were like, no, you ain't gonna get that here. Like, don't be thinking because we have, you know, Black Lives Matter painted on our court that we're not talking about this. This is exactly why we are here, because we know your eyes are here. So therefore your ears should be here too. And so I don't think that players were holding back. I think that they were incredibly honest because they knew that the time called for it. You know, some of the stuff that did come out about the behind the scenes, you know, maybe some division towards the method. Would they had wanted that to come out? No. And the only reason why they wouldn't want that to come out is because we, the media, would probably take it and run to be like, look, guys, these people aren't organized. When really, when we talk about strategy in any room, there's going to be two sides. And so I think that when it comes to maybe things that some players were hoping did not come out, it had to have probably been the conversations around the process and the behind the scenes meetings after the Bucks had decided that they were going to strike.
Yeah, I agree. I think all movements need that friction that you're talking about, Kayla. You need a little bit of Malcolm and you need a little bit of Martin. Like every movement
Mhm.
needs it, right? And I think they're both good, and they both actually strengthen each other, especially when you don't have a crabs in a bucket mentality when they're competing with each other. And certainly, you know, there are some things where I'm like, man, damn, you're gonna do them like that, Kayla. But we need it. We need it. And so I actually think I don't know if they were to answer your question, Ryan, I don't think they were, couching what they wanted to say or muted. In fact, what I think happened is they realized their collective strength. And when I say collective strength, I'm not even just talking about NBA players. They realize that, wait a minute, like not only can we shut this down in the playoffs, but we're going to make baseball shut it down over there. Our WNBA sisters are going to be with us because they've been with us before we were down. They never went to sleep. They always were woke. And then we're going to make the NFL players shut it down over there. MLS, you better shut it down over there. Hockey, okay, do what you're going to do, hockey. Like that, I think they realized that they had power beyond even like the four lines of that court. And so, if anything, I think that they set an example, put a template out there, and they realized that they have some collective strength, as athletes and activists, not just as basketball players.
For sure, for sure. I agree with all those great points, especially when we're talking about how, it's beyond just the NBA, it's affecting all other sports. And so that leads actually right into the next kind of question I really want to hear about from you guys. So what do you guys think that besides from, the power that they've kind of manifested or finally started to believe in and realize that they have, what makes the NBA or I guess basketball, especially within our time right now in 2020 with the whole pandemic and everything, so different or unique at this specific point in time from the other sports or even the historical moments that have allowed, this sea of change in breakthroughs for sport activism compared to, whether it's football, baseball, stuff like that?
Yeah, I could try and tackle this one first, Kay. Since it's a hip hop theme, I'll use a Kanye West line. You can't tell me nothing. Basically, is the difference. Like, what are you gonna tell LeBron? Athletes in the past, and still athletes in other sports, but basketball athletes in the past. Well, I don't know if it's going to affect my shoe money. I don't know if I'm going to get, TV interviews and that exposure. I don't know. I don't know what my agency is going to say. Well, let's go through the list. He owns his agency, so they're going to be good. He has a lifetime deal with Nike. They're going to be good. He's got Spring Hill Entertainment. He's creating his own content, right? He doesn't need ESPN or HBO. They need him. They're writing him a check. So he really is a businessman, right? So he doesn't have to check with anybody before he puts out a statement, before he calls the president a bum. Because he is the CEO. And I think that's the greatest difference. So he sets the high watermark, and then all the other athletes follow and say, okay, yeah, like we got a little bit of cover because LeBron's doing it over here and Steph's doing it over here. So yeah, we can't speak up. And I think that's the difference, is that you're not beholden to other people and stakeholders, and thus you have to worry about how you move in those spaces. No, LeBron's creating the spaces for other people to come and move. And so he could be as honest and as forthright about anything as he wants. And in fact, what he's done is he's used that platform to speak directly to the issues that he cares about. More than a vote, registering people to vote, getting people to volunteer as poll workers, building a school and a leadership academy to get people with underprivileged situations what they need to be successful. I could go on and on and on. So I think that's the greatest difference, is that he doesn't have to be a consensus builder when he's thinking about how political or how social or how open he wants to be. He checks with Maverick and he checks with Randy, and he does what he wants to do. And I think that's a difference from certainly the Jordan era, but that's a difference currently from what the real realities are in other sports right now.
I mean, Jordan's coming around.
True.
This third installment of Michael Jordan is the best I've seen in
It's
a whole.
true.
I'm a big fan of this Michael Jordan, who's really bad about it. But I think, Donnovan, what you're leaning towards is ownership. Listen, we will not fool ourselves into thinking that playing basketball is all LeBron James is concerned about. He understands the importance of ownership, in particular Black ownership. I won't be surprised if down the line we don't see LeBron own a team. And I think that is what this beautiful play is all about, is for him to one day own a team, and to do many other things and open up many other doors and revenues. Because I think, we look so much at LeBron, and we can get caught up on the numbers as well, but I get caught up on who he is as a person, and that is the guy to bring other people with him through the door, give other people their opportunities, empower the Rich Pauls of the world to go about their business their way and do things on their terms, and that kind of coincides with the league. Is what's happening now when you have your greatest star running on that energy. Sure, yeah, there's gut checks. A lot of players know they are not a LeBron. They know if LeBron says we are not playing Christmas, they're not playing Christmas. Like, everyone kind of knows their role. But what's so important is everybody knows how far an empowered person can go. And this is why the NBA is leaps and bounds than when you say, look at the MLB, the NHL, the NFL. This is an empowered league. The world moves as the NBA moves. And so you look at what the players were able to do. They went on strike for 3 days, and they came back to the table with polling stations. I mean, we now look at what happened in the election, and how huge was that to get people to register to vote. And so for me, that time in the bubble where players could really start to feel themselves and what they could start to do to be like, we'll do the talking, of course. We will front this, of course, but we're going to need other people to pull up their bootstraps too to get in this with us. I don't think we're ever going to see the NBA the same again, because I think players are really starting to understand just the way that the true power that they have. And so I do think there's going to be a lot stiffer fights. I'm not going to lie. When it comes to what the league looks like in the front office positions, in the coaching positions, players are starting to really make themselves be heard. And I think that is so important. And it's something that, you're going to look back to history books. This is going to be a very transforming time, especially and it's going to be the NBA that's leading these times.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, and Kayla mentioned the election and the key difference that the NBA made. Like, it's not just token thing, it's tangible. Look at the states that were in play. Wisconsin, what did they do with their arena in Milwaukee? At Georgia, the Atlanta arena was the largest polling station in the history of the state. Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia 76 ownership group was on board to do this before the players shut it down. So there's a real tangible effect in what the players did and keeping a free democracy alive. And when we talk about LeBron, and again, this is a hip hop driven conversation, who were his mentors early in his career? The people who he idolized himself after. 2, Warren Buffett was one. He wanted to learn about not just being a millionaire, but a billionaire. And Jay-Z. He learned at the feet from the guy who not only was not a businessman, but a businessman, but he put it in rhyme. He learned at the feet of Jay-Z. And now, in a very hip hop way, he's done the same thing in sport, where he goes up, he blows up, he gets his value, then he brings others with him and creates his own company. So Dr. Dre, no, he doesn't just work for Interscope. He starts Aftermath. And then he brings up this guy, Marshall Mathers, and he starts D12 and Shady. And he brings up this guy, 50 Cent, and he starts G-Unit. So you can see the compound interest of that value. And LeBron's doing the same thing with Clutch, his basketball agency, but he's doing the same thing in other ventures in terms of entertainment, lifestyle, etc. And if you've seen not only the workers for his companies, but what the boards look like, they look a lot like me, Ryan, and Kayla. Like they look like the world, and not just the old boys club where those spaces normally look. So don't get it twisted. When we're talking about in this conversation, the tie between sports and activism and hip hop, LeBron is a great example that he's using a template that hip hop started, and he's now taking it even further.
For sure. Even just to add to that, like as we're talking about LeBron and his whole power, this goes even just a couple of years back, I believe, LeBron and the shut up and dribble incident, the way he responded was through several interviews first, but he's had his company Uninterrupted where he's embodied athletes. He's provided a platform for athletes to be empowered and to speak their voices. We've seen these in his YouTube videos, all his interviews. He's brought people like Drake, Chris Bosh, other WNBA players, even just hip hop artists themselves. He's managed to bring all these other athletes and artists to have a platform to raise their voices about issues that are important to them. So that's definitely a great point that you brought up with LeBron being one of the biggest faces, especially with the NBA or even just athletes in general, discussing, anything regarding social issues.
And he made
Let's take a moment right here.
He made a video for Amazon called "Shut Up and Dribble."
Shut up and dribble.
He made his message. Okay, you want me to shut up and dribble? I'm gonna get my message out. I'm gonna collect these checks.
Right, I'm gonna get paid for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey everyone, sorry, I'm going to jump in really quick. We've actually got some people from the audience that wanted to chat and ask some questions, so I think this is a good time just to take a pause. And Steph, you messaged me and you said you wanted to chat or say something. The mic is yours if you want to step up. Steph, you've been really patient. I appreciate that. It's all yours if you want to chat.
Hi, sorry, I just had some computer issues. Awesome. This is a really, really informative talk, and I'm really grateful that you guys have just come here and talked about it. I really appreciate it. I guess one question I have is seeing how much have athletes have done for advocating for sports and within sport for movements and things that matter. Do you feel the traditional narrative of sticking to sports or shut up and dribble? Do you feel those narratives are still existing? And do you think that this differs amongst sports, and what are your thoughts on that, basically? Thanks.
Thank you. I think activism has always been a part of sport. And we could take it back to Muhammad Ali, Bill Russell, Colin Kaepernick. I think when we hear "shut up and dribble," it's stuck to and always happens to be when Black athletes speak out. We just had Bobby Orr, Jay Cutler, Jack Nicklaus copy and paste their letters of support for Donald Trump. I'm just wondering where all that energy around shutting up and playing sport was. And I mean, granted, none of them can still do that, but where was all that energy for that? And so it's interesting to me that shut up and dribble. It sticks when it comes to Black athletes, and it's because of the years and years of conditioning that Black people are only meant to entertain. We are only here to lift and to do the physical stuff and to entertain. So God forbid we have some sort of opinion, stance, because we should just be so happy to be here. And what I love about the years and kind of looking over those who have stood before these athletes now who have come to the forefront of this movement is they're but that is not who we are. As Donnovan says, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, and I'll be damned if it just is going to stop here. And so I do think we're going to see more forms of shut up and dribble, but that is the reaction of a type of people that do not want to hear from Black people. So until we start to truly dismantle systemic racism, I don't think that shut up and dribble messaging is going to go away, because that is fueled in hate.
Hey, Ryan, we've got another question from someone in the audience. Mike Lang, I see you. You got your hand up nice and patiently. I appreciate that. Mike, the mic is yours.
Yes, thank you. And that's actually the name of my podcast, Langert the Mic. By the way, thank you so much, Kayla and Donnovan, for doing this. Shout out to CSM as well. We got two other CSMers here in Peter Walker and Rain Rashid. Want to give them a shout out. And I guess my question to you guys is, as an aspire, I want to look at the broadcasting side, because the three of us, we're aspiring broadcasters, and me personally, as an aspiring white broadcaster, what should my role in acknowledging or supporting social activism and Black Lives Matter? What should my role be in terms of supporting or acknowledging social activism?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, for me, it ties a little bit into Steph's question, because she kind of asked, if the shut up and dribble mentality is still a thing. And I'll tell you, it's certainly still a thing for broadcasters. I tell you, if you want to talk about race, you're going to see it on your timeline if you got some pigment in your skin. And so we certainly see that, and we hear that all the time. And the thing for me is the way, everyone should approach these issues to me, it's quite simple. COVID-19 is real. Obviously, people's lives are being affected by it every day. It's a pandemic, and so we talk about it as it relates to sports. Haley Wickenheiser is a great champion, conquered COVID-19, raised lots of money. Great Canadian story. She and everyone who volunteered should be celebrated. We're also suffering from a racial pandemic at the same time. And for people to act like you shouldn't talk about it, sports and race don't mix, sports and politics don't mix. Frankly, I would say it's a human rights issue, not a political issue, but everything, quite frankly, is political. But you can't say that they don't mix, that because they're in the fabric of sports. They've always been there. They always will be. It's naive to say that they don't matter. So to me, you are doing an incomplete job in your storytelling, and you are endeavoring in lazy journalism if you don't acknowledge when it's a factor when it is. You don't have to make it more than it is. We get accused of playing the race card all the time. I'll show you my wallet. There's no race card in there. You can't play it because you can't take it away. You're always going to be Black. Race is always going to be a factor. Most of the athletes in the sport we're talking about in basketball are Black. So I think it's acknowledging it, understanding that it does play a factor, and covering it like you would cover anything else, fairly, objectively. And so that's the thing for me. Like if we want to cover sports properly, we can't just close our eyes and ignore something that's there because it makes some people uncomfortable. Yeah, what do you think, Kay?
Yeah, I would agree. I also would say that, over the last little while, it's no surprise Donnovan and I have been doing a lot of lifting. Now, I would love if I could just sign into work one day and just talk about basketball, but these are not the times. And I'm not saying that I'm not grateful and that I don't want to talk about it because it's so personal to me. So of course I will show up for my communities in the ways that it has shown up for me to talk about race. But my goodness, it should never always just be on Black people to talk about things that we did not create or uphold. And so for me, I would say if you are, say, my white counterpart, show up in these conversations as well. But before you show up, I will say educate yourself. Really educate. Google is free. I think, so many people have asked, and this is taking, the industry out of it. My white friends or white people that have contacted me, what can I do? And they're asking all these questions. And it's like, Google is free. Educate yourself. You don't put that extra burden on your BIPOC friends, because to me, that just comes off as, one, lazy, but also two, you're checking in on someone when they can do something for you. So those are the spaces in which, and also you're going to find that you might get further ahead in spaces, in particular in Canadian sport media, because of the color of your skin, because it just has always been this way for so long. And it might be a lift, However, I mean, I try to take stock of certain rooms to be like, why do we have any Indigenous representation in here? Or if something comes up, do we think that we're the best people to be talking about this? Or should we try to, there are different ways that you can be helpful, and that you can advocate for people that are not in the room by simply asking why they are not in the room when they should be in the room. So that's what I would say. Hopefully that's helpful.
Awesome. Thank you, Kayla and Donnovan. Thank you for everyone else for those questions. And so while we're on this topic, we've got to see and hear Kayla Gray and Donnovan Bennett as sports broadcasters on TV, radio, and online, reporting the NBA protests, commenting on sports in general. So commenting on how sports are amplifying calls for social justice. But would you guys be comfortable just sharing with us how you both felt on a personal level as Black individuals having to live through these moments of what we've seen over the past summer or during this pandemic, if anything, and how you guys have felt living through these moments with your friends, family, and even just the community in general?
Yeah, sure. So when George Floyd was murdered, I kind of was like, one, not surprised, because Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, Ahmaud Arbery was right before that and didn't seem to make much of a difference. And, but everyone else was, outraged and shocked. And I was kind of like, where you been? Like, why is this different? And so the whole thing, to be honest, made me feel a little gross. And lots of content was being produced about it, think pieces. And Kayla actually, as a leader, put together an IG group of, I'm putting our business in the street, but put together an IG group of it's a bunch of Black Canadian journalists. And it was actually really helpful. Support, best practices, just talking through things. And I said on a Zoom call that we did that, like, I'm good. Like, I'm gonna sit this out. Like, I can't find an angle in sports. I don't really want to talk about it. It's just the whole situation is making me feel gross. And Morgan Campbell basically talked some sense in me and said, like, you can't sit it out. Like, someone's gonna write stories about it, and you got to make sure that they're not bad. So you might as well do them. And there's interest, so that's what time it is. And little did I know at that point when he kind of whipped some sense in me that and I'm sure you probably feel this way, Kayla, that I was about to get on a book tour for a book that I didn't write. But that is what it was like for like months, to be honest. And just when it started to die down, we lost Jacob Blake and it started again. So it's been a lot. It's exhausting. I constantly have to think and take appraisal of, this is an important point to make. This is an important story to tell, but also, like, I don't want to be pigeonholed as just telling these stories, because those aren't the only things that I have thoughts about. Those are the only things that I can't apply my talents towards, but those are the only things that I get phone calls about, showing up on podcasts and radio shows about. And so it's a constant balance of determining, this is an important issue, people need to hear about it, and finally some people are paying attention. But at the same time, I don't want to actively typecast myself. And quite frankly, I'm somewhat angry I have to even think about it, because those are not thoughts and deliberations that some of my colleagues and counterparts have to think about. They just think about doing the work. And at the end of the day, I'm going to be evaluated on doing the work. So it's a lot to process. And I said this to a group of Humber students earlier in the week. There's no race chapter in journalism school, at least not when we were coming through. I mean, now, like, I'm thankful for platform like this, but this is not something that you're taught. It's just, you know, sink or swim, figure it out on the fly. And if you don't, then the industry eats you up. So it's a constant appraisal of what do I have energy for, what makes sense, what can I be additive towards and not just be another person screaming. And the other thing I found, and I'm interested to hear how Kayla feels about the way her work has been consumed, is sometimes I would put stuff out and I would look at the comments and it's just people arguing with each other, not actually talking about the issue. They're just on both sides using it as a vehicle to fight. And I'm like, am I putting more, you know, toxicity into the atmosphere by trying to do this work? So yeah, I mean, there is no real right answer. You just kind of have to figure it out and make the best judgment in the moment.
Yeah, I think like you, I was just going through all the feels. Exhaustion at first, tired, hurt because it felt like people just found out racism existed. And so it was just kind of confusing to me, because I really did feel at a point like I was explaining things to 2-year-olds. Like, and I mean that respectfully, but like just how basically you had to break things down. And so that took effort. And then of course, you know, you look on social media and just how vile people could be towards you. And while, you know, I will say that, yeah, we are built for this. This is what we do. Some days your skin's tender. So some days you're just not up for it. You know, I've had my job threatened via somebody. I've had, you know, some days you feel like, man, is this all that I'm good for, is for speaking on race? And you know, it's funny because I felt like for the first time, because industry conditioning as Black professionals, you are made to feel so lucky to be somewhere. And unfortunately, under these disgusting circumstances, for the first time, I actually felt needed. And that realization, boy, that'll knock you off your feet. But still you persist on through the anger and the exhaustion and, you know, the some days of just being like, nah, I can't check out. I also have never felt more in my purpose than I do now, because I got into a minute of the video, and I'll admit I never sat through 8 minutes and 46 seconds of watching someone that looked like me being killed. I only got through 1.5. And I think the first 30 seconds I said to myself, girl, you better find your voice, because you're going to need to speak. You're going to need to say something. And if you get fired, so be it. You lost your job, but someone just lost their life. And I think it was just the accumulation of that. And it wasn't like it just started at George Floyd, like Donnovan said. It was so many people, it felt like. And I think once I got to that point, I was just like, all right, it's go time. Tyrone Edwards on the social had said, I am not muting myself any further. Because he's like, listen, like, y'all gonna hear me. I'm not just here for entertainment. Things need to change. And for me, I felt like that was a huge rallying cry for a lot of people in our industry, Black professionals in our industry on air, to be like, no, we'll also step with you too. And so, yeah, I guess I'm still day to day, you know, even the anxiety of the US election and finding out that Biden, I mean, if Trump ever wants to be a gracious person, Biden had won. You kind of feel like you can exhale, but it's like a half exhale, because you feel as though general people who have been along with this listening and learning journey are going to think that racism is over because Joe Biden has won, because they've pinned racism on one person. But they don't understand that, yeah, sure, Donald Trump could be like a spokesperson for racism, but racism still exists in Canada. It exists in our day to day. It exists in our systems, in how we show up at work. And so, yeah, like I guess right now I'm a little bit hesitant. That's the feeling that I have right now, is I'm feeling like some foots are getting taken off the gas. But at the same time, I'm also like, for my mental health, is it worth it for me to worry about that right now? Is it worth it for me to worry about the release of feet on the gas pedals, or is it just more worth it for me to focus on what I can focus on and focus on the work that I'm doing outside of the 280 characters on Twitter?
Thank you, Donovan and Kayla. We really, really appreciate that, just especially for someone like myself, as a Chinese Canadian, someone who doesn't experience the same thing as you. And even relating back to Mike's question, people that are not like you, we get to finally hear how it feels experiencing these certain moments. So it's really great to hear that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and one thing I just should say to follow up, because I gave a bunch of names, and those names are American, because quite frankly, Americans are much better at branding this issue and making it a hashtag. But I think part of the trauma is that we're well aware that this is a Canadian issue, right? And Andrew Loku and DeFonte Miller and, the generations of missing and murdered Indigenous women. This is an issue that is on our doorstep right here. And even you, Ryan, as a Asian Canadian, the way many people have treated your community post coronavirus is irreprehensible. So I think part of the reason why we're passionate about this issue is because we know that it's not just us. It's a bigger issue. It's not just in the United States, it's in Canada. It's not just Black people, it's BIPOC people in general. That quite frankly, Black women have it twice as hard. That it's the LGBTQ plus community. So if you're talking about minorities in that community that are female, compound that by 3. We just know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it needs to be done urgently.
For sure. So just to flip the page a little bit, to get away from just that little subject and bring back a little bit of the hip hop there. So in with your guys' work and your experiences, how have you guys seen the way maybe NBA players, NFL players, or just athletes in general are maybe taking pages from the hip hop culture in respect to how they either utilize social media or how they're responding to these issues of social activism and social injustice, I would say?
Honestly, I think the NBA, again, it's so fascinating, and you'll look also to like the Odell Beckham Juniors of the world that I think are incredibly fascinating in the way that they've self-branded on social media. Whether it be Donovan, I don't remember when walking through a tunnel to get to the game was such a thing for your whole, the photos of your fits to be posted on now what we know as league fits on Instagram. But for me, what's been great is what is happening now with athletes on this professional stage and the ways in which they've been able to make money off their names. It strengthens the argument and fight for those at the collegiate level to also start putting forefront the proper conversations that need to be had about making money off their likeness and names as well. And whether or not that's intentional, I think that it has made a lot of us revisit the power of name as opposed to power of, say, team or league. Gone are the days where, say, oh, that person plays for the Steelers, right? And that was the hot thing. Now you're looking at you're looking at the individual person as opposed to the collective. And so for me, watching players, and what makes my job a little bit easier is it gives that context. It adds to the depth of conversation that I've been able to have with players because they've shown who they are outside of what they do, with what music they're listening to. Everyone's got a PS5. I've seen it now on my on my social media channel a lot. But I think that I just described is straight out of the book of hip hop, because you look at rappers, you look at artists, all they have is their name. So that is all that they've known to brand, and they've done such a good job at that. So I almost feel like that was the perfect blueprint that athletes have come in to kind of copy and paste, and it's made their fight even more successful.
Yeah, they've used their platform. They've figured out the way hip hop has, you know, don't let the game use you, use the game, right? And so if it is, you know, Dr. Dre, he's not making money off of just music. He's making his real money off of beats, right? 50 Cent is making his real money off of Vitamin Water. Diddy is making his real money off of Ciroc. So they're making the real money, not off the music that they make, which they're known for. They've parlayed that into other things. And certainly we've seen athletes use their platform and their talents to do the exact same thing. Like there was a sea change in LeBron's career. And we talked about earlier that leadership that he got from not just Warren Buffett, from Jay-Z, you know, where in his endorsement deals and partnering with companies, he didn't take a check anymore. He took equity, right? Like he's taking value, he's taking stock. And so when Kayla talks about him being a future NBA owner, that would be the second professional, you know, sports team that he's tied with, because he's got some stock in Liverpool and he's got some stock in the Red Sox and the Fenway Group. And so he's done that. But now, again, with Uninterrupted, what he's also doing is he's leveraging those relationships with the brands so that they're telling stories that he wants to tell and they're paying for it. That they're, you know, being real active on initiatives that he cares about and they're paying for it. So they're figuring out a way to use that platform for monetary reasons, but also the relationships with brands for more reasons. And again, you know, that I think is part of the history of hip hop as well.
Hey everyone, I'm just going to jump in real quick. Thanks Ryan for letting me know there's a nice little break there, but we've got some questions from audience members. And one person particularly messaged me and asked me to ask on behalf of them. It's from Peter, and the question is, Kayla, Donnovan, do you feel optimistic about the future and what they'd like to expect or see from other leagues that haven't been as progressive? So like as in the NHL.
Listen, I don't think I would fight this hard if I didn't believe people would change. That, like, as much as, you know, people say that I like to be pessimistic, I like to say that the way that I argue is more with an optimistic undertone. Is if people will not change, what the heck is the point of all of this? If we do not believe that a better future can be achieved. The speed in which I think people will change is a whole different conversation and or question. And some are still at the performative stage, meaning that they are willing to kind of put all these front-facing campaigns, but they're not ready to do the real work. Listen, I've had a very transformational October. That is not my job to figure out how I sit on somebody else's journey. But what I will say is, I think I almost respect it more from certain leagues that aren't there yet, to just be like, yo, we ain't there yet. We could stand to sit back, listen, and learn some more. And I think the NHL kind of sort of did that with their press release when they first acknowledged that maybe they weren't doing what they could have, should have, would have been doing. But what I think was harmful in their case is they had the HDA right there in the rooms with them, who did the work for them to be like, but these are things that you need to do. And they're actually not hard things. This is just a list of demands that'll make you look better. We did the sweat equity. You just got to see these things through. And then what happened? There is no longer a relationship. The HDA is now on working independently and continuing the great work that they've started. And so I think in that case, it's unfortunate, but now we know, as consumers, we know. And so when leagues might see some major drop-offs, because I think now what we're seeing is audience want to see who you are. Okay. And I think that audiences are well within their rights to know who and what they're spending their money with as consumers. And so when you show someone who they are, you then give them the power to make their decisions after that point. And so if they decide not to rock with you or watch you, that's a you problem. And so for me, I the NHL is a very interesting case. And you know, there's a lot of conversations that need to be had, because I have connected with fan bases of the NHL that do want to see substantial change, but they just do not think that the league that they support is there yet. And we can see it in, you know, one social media post of, say, a Black athlete, and you see the heaps of replies of people who keep coming back with their hate. And so, you know, this is a conversation I've had with even our work as well, is let's check who keeps coming back in our responses on social media, because we need to do a gut check to figure out who are we making feel comfortable. And so I think that certain leagues need to start doing that as well, and particularly the NHL.
Yeah. Okay. Well, a couple housekeeping things. So you said that you're kind of an optimist. You're an optimist. You're an optimist. And anyone who thinks Kayla is not an optimist, they just are of the class who file any Black woman with an opinion as an angry Black woman. You're an optimist. Now, you keep it 100, where I like try to keep it like at 95, but you're 100% an optimist. But to answer the question, I generally try to be optimistic because like it costs the same, so you might as well be. But I actually think, and I'm different from many people in the sense, I don't really care why we get there. I just want to get there. I don't really care if people have good intentions or if it's for PR. I just want the good outcomes for people that look like me. And I think we are going to get there, because if it isn't for morals, at some point it's going to be for money. And if we use the NHL as an example, if you want to grow the tent and you want to increase your fan base, well, you're going to have to reach across the aisle and show to some people that you're down for their causes. And just look at the immigration patterns of the United States and of Canada. The country is changing. The world is changing, quite frankly, because more and more people who don't necessarily look like each other are having babies with each other. So you're going to have to get on board with reaching out to some communities that you haven't had to in the past to make money. If you want to continue to forget about make more money, if you want your revenue to be flat, you're going to have to do that. So I think at some point, there is going to be an actuarial scientist that says the light bulb needs to go on if you want to continue to make some revenue. And I think that will change it. I don't know when that will be. I don't know, but it's a math equation. Like, you need to diversify what you're doing, not just for your fan base, which is a big reason, for your actual product. If you want to continue to recruit the top athletes in your sport, we're talking about hockey now, but it's going to be the same for football more and more, then you're going to have to do it in a way that caters to an audience. And I'm not just talking about diversity in terms of race and ethnicity. I'm talking about diversity in terms of sensibility. I'm talking diversity in terms of age, in terms of culture. Like, all of those things matter. And I think they're going to have to get on board with all of them really, really quickly. So I am optimistic because, again, like, to tie this back into hip hop was considered niche at some point. And now look at the top of the Billboard charts. Like, I find it crazy watching videos of like huge, when we could do this, arenas packed in Japan. And they're screaming Western Road flows, and they have no idea where Western Road is. But that's the power of what we're talking about. And sports, if they want those dollars, they're gonna have to get on board.
Thanks so much. I'm gonna jump in here really quick. So we're at 4:21. This conversation has just been amazing and going so quickly. I want to open it up really quickly to anyone in the audience if you have a quick comment or just a remark or something you want to share quickly. We're winding down to the end of our session. So if you want to jump in and say something, by all means, please just get in here, blow it up in chat, jump on. I see Mike. Mike's got his hand up. Go for it, Mike.
Yes, hi again. So I'm actually Jewish, and as a Jewish person, I deal with anti-Semitism, or people deal with anti-Semitism, and I see a lot of connections to what we deal with in anti-Semitism versus, you know, the Black community and racism. So I think that, like, just to retort on, you know, on how things are actually going to change, I think what we learn, at least in terms of dealing with anti-Semitism, is the biggest hope is to address it to people that can easily be swayed, because you have the extreme one side and the extreme other side. So the biggest hope is if we can convince everyone in the middle to be aware of social injustice and to be part of the change. I think that is our biggest hope going forward. And I want to, if you want to chime in, feel free to do so, of course, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good perspective in terms of coverage, which was your first question. Like, you know, injustice anywhere leads to injustice everywhere. And so if we're going to talk about these issues, and we also have to cover, like, when Nick Cannon or Deshaun Jackson or Steven Jackson says something that is out of pocket about a different community than theirs. And in this case, for the uninitiated, they said some things that were anti-Semitic. So again, I think all of these things, you know, ladder together. And I think they all should be important talking points.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also too, part of this work, and you'll see with Donovan's coverage as well, for me, I'm also educating and figuring out ways in which I can show up for other marginalized communities. Because frankly, and it's not to say I've just been kind of focused on my own, but I do understand that I can expand my knowledge in ways that I can show up for other people in rooms that they are not. And I think that that's incredibly important. I'm also at a point where I am half tired of convincing people to be decent. So when I make my content, or I put out interviews, or I say something, I think that those are for people that are ready to hear it. Because I'm realizing that when you get into back and forth with people on social media or online, no one's trying to learn anything at that point. They're just trying to scream as loud. And I really need to get my lyrics together. But Jay-Z, what was the one? If someone from across the room sees two fools yelling, they never know who's who. Definitely butchered that line, but you know. And so I kind of think of that as I kind of navigate how to engage in conversations via social media.
Amazing. I'm going to jump in one more time. It's challenging because we're just nearly at the end of our conversation. I'm going to jump in. Kayla, I'm going to put you last on this question because I don't know if you got the original question or if you need a second or two to think about it. But Donnovan, I asked you what your hip hop track was that best kind of encapsulated how you felt about this time, this place, and the topics we're talking about right now. Can you share with everyone what that is and just maybe say something quick about that?
Sure. So I think my answer was Kendrick Lamar. All right, because I do think that it's gonna be all right, which is the chorus. I would say personally, you know, that's my collective answer for this movement. Personally, it would be Nipsey Hussle, "Grinding on My Life." Rest in peace, Nip. But I think Kendrick, who himself is a poet and a leader, his optimism and his realism, I think, is important.
You took my Kendrick song. But here's who I am. I could be half Kendrick, all right, but I could also be half Kendrick energy, okay, or element rather. That song can get a little. But I think it's not so much like the lyrics are a little much, but it's more so just this energy of, you know, an element. I don't like, I'ma just do me. This is who I am. This is what you're gonna get. This is how it's gonna continue. And I'm gonna make it look sexy. That's anyone that knows that song, they know what I'm talking about. But then also to echo Donovan's Kendrick, I do think we will be all right. It's just going to take work. There's a quote going around on social media that was like, manifestive, but still work at it. And, I think that kind of applies here. Is I know one day I will not have to tell my son at some point he has to work twice as hard because of the color of his skin. But I know in order to get to that day, it's going to take work. And that is work I'm willing to put in.
Really quickly, Ryan, can you share with us yours? And then what else let the chat, because we're running out of time almost. I'm going to say a quick word about something we'd like to ask you to do to help us. And then I'm going to pass it on to Zoe to say some final comments and some goodbyes and everything. So Ryan, really quickly, what was your choice, your hip hop track choice?
I believe mine was The Bigger Picture by Lil Baby. He dropped that just in the midst of the whole Black Lives Matters protests and everything. He just really talks about that it's more to it than just the one murder of George Floyd. It's beyond. It goes back to history. It goes back to everything that's not said. So I really like that one. It fits really greatly here.
Nice choice, man. I appreciate that. I appreciate all of you. So, man, we are at the end of this big, long conversation. This has been incredible. I'm going to leave the final notes. Oh, sorry, Don.
Can I just say one thing?
Of course you can.
Shout out to Ryan, who did a great job.
Yes, Ryan, you did
said
that,
it with his
Ryan.
chest, got the earrings in. You did an awesome job, man. That was a great conversation.
That was amazing.
Blow it up, Ryan. Chat, blow it up for Ryan. That's what I meant to say. Sorry.
look, Mark, I'm proud.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to say one quick thing, and then I'm going to let Zoe speak and say goodbye and give you well wishes. So I'm going to put something in chat. I'm waiting for chat to die down a little bit so everyone can see it and won't blow by y'all. But we're going to ask you for some feedback. This is a quick little survey that just give us thoughts about what you experienced today, what you thought about today, what we can do in the future. Now, most people will look at a survey and be like, oh, whatever, I'll just fill it out, whatever. But I want to make a point here. And I want you all to listen, and I want you to think about this. So these surveys are important not because we hear from you, but it's information that we can share with people higher up. People with names like provost or warden or vice chancellor, people that have large amounts of power and influence. When we share, okay, I'm dropping in the chat right now. There we go. When we share your thoughts and feedbacks about thinking that this is and knowing that this is important, when we can share that centering and celebrating Black voices, the Black lived experience, and these moments in sport with people that have power, that makes change happen. So your 3 minutes filling out a survey can amplify our ability to keep doing that. So if you care about this, if this matters to you, please fill that information out so we can continue spreading the word about how great this program is. Zoe, that's all I want to say. It's in chat. Please fill it out. Zoe, to you.
Wow. So first of all, that whole talk felt like about 15 minutes. It was so engaging. It was so interesting. I was scribbling notes and madly chatting with Brad in the chat saying, I have a question. But I don't have time to ask all of them now. So I will definitely be following up with you guys. I'm gonna post, Kayla, I'm gonna post your video shortly, the Where Can We Be Black. It's so awesome. If you haven't seen it, go and have a look at it. Donnovan, I may have to chat to you about your comment. I heard you on Writer's Block, I think in the summer, talking about defending your wanting to trade Kyle Lowry a few years ago, but we'll get into that later, I guess. Then some fighting words there, but thank you both. It was so good. Some of the notes that I scribbled down here, Kayla, you were talking about trauma and Black trauma and how it's been kind of read and experienced and kind of like made into this, public consumption, and kind of walking that line. And I think that, personally what affected me is just seeing that Doc Rivers post game interview. I mean, I shared that with so many people and I just thought, wow, like here's this man of whatever age and just in so much pain and like not even being able to kind of hold it and all the things that, you know, he talked about already experiencing in his lifetime. And again, it's sort of a John Carlos moment, just to be back at the same point. I just really felt for him in that moment. But at the same time, thinking about him being so open, and what you both were saying about players being open and expressing things with you, and wondering about, you know, that particularly Black male vulnerability being really important too for our community, and to show that and to build empathy and to show that, you know, these people are real people with real feelings, and that it's okay as a Black male to show that side. So I took some inspiration from that, even though the root cause isn't good. We didn't mention, I wanted to talk a little bit about Evander Kane, like all kinds of things I had on my list here, but I think what that shows me is that maybe we need a part 2 of this conversation. So hopefully we're welcome to reach out back to both of you, and you would agree, schedule's allowing, to do something else. Of course, next term it'll be basketball season again, so who knows, you'll probably both be quite busy, but really thank you for your guidance and the wisdom and experience, and just sharing all these great thoughts and comments with us. And it's been great, and I thank you so much.